then, well, let's go ahead and get started. First thing I would like to do is just to introduce myself. My name is Ermenrich, mundanely Matt Loggeman, if you want to look me up on Facebook. The topic that we're going to be discussing today is rethinking court. Specifically, we're going to look at how we set up court, both in the physical realm, but also in how we set it up as far as our agenda goes and the items that we have there in court. All right. I should say this course is not based off of something you can fact check. So you can't go to an encyclopedia or to a treatise on heraldry or acoustics and necessarily be able to check off all the boxes here. What this is based off of is my knowledge and background in theater and entertainment, my knowledge as a vocal herald, and my knowledge as a former landed baron, and being on sort of both sides of court. As the herald who has to stick to that agenda and make those announcements, to the baron who has to think about what goes into that agenda and how do we arrange things. I think oftentimes we think of court setup as sort of the thing the herald takes care of, but a lot of those decisions are made by the royals or the nobles who are heading up court. And so this is really to all of those parties involved. So while I'm going through here, please feel free, if you do have a question, a comment, a thought, to use the chat that is here. Also, if you've never used Zoom before, in the participants window, if you hit the participants button down there at the bottom, it should bring up a window with everyone's names. At the bottom of that, there's the ability for you to raise your hand. If you raise your hand, your name jumps to the top of my list and allows me to see that you have a question. And then I can ask you to come off of mute and share what you want with everyone, all right? But if you'd rather not speak out loud, you can also ask a question there using the chat feature. Likewise, if you'd like to ask a question but remain anonymous, there's a way to just whisper me as well. So you can just send that message to me, and if so, I'll still answer the question, but I'll not say who asked it if you do have something in there, all right? So taking a look at all of this, let's talk about rethinking court. First and foremost, let's talk about the philosophies that I sort of went through when I was thinking about this, all right? So I had 4 things that I tried to think of when I was going, okay, how do we want to set up court? What guiding principles do I want to have in this idea? The first one, court is an important ritual in the SCA. It is important, and it takes on a ritual aspect for us. It is one of the first things that we think about when it comes to the Middle Ages, of the stories of King Arthur, or of the courts of the Chinese emperors. We think of these courts of Elizabeth. And the meaning of court may be a little bit different as we talk about also the people and sort of the agendas that happen in the Middle Ages, but we use those same words of court for those things and what we do here in the SCA. So it has that special place for us. It is special. That court that is special is also a shared experience. It is not just for the herald. It is not just for the nobles. It is not just for the award recipient. It is for all of us. We are all sharing in that experience. And in that experience, it should be entertaining. Now, when I say entertaining, I don't necessarily mean that it needs to be funny. Drama is entertaining. A mystery is entertaining. To be entertaining does not mean a comedy. It just means that we have to be engaged and want to know what's coming next, to want to be there. And last but certainly not least, court should be accessible to all who attend. If you come to court, you should be able to access that ritual, that shared experience, that entertainment. It shouldn't matter where you are in court or what your rank is within the SCA. It needs to be accessible to each and every person who wishes to attend. All right? I'm going to share a couple of stories with you throughout this based off of my experience. Here's one. A couple of years ago, when I was the Baron of Cinnabar, I was at an event and Kasia was not with me. So I was the only landed from the barony. It was an event with no royalty, but there was going to be sort of a group baronial court at the end of the event. So it's about 15 minutes before court starts, and I see a bunch of the populace of Cinnabar packing up their stuff and putting it in their vehicles. Well, where are you going? I asked. Oh, we're all gonna out to eat. We're gonna skip court. We're gonna go out to eat. You want to come? Like, well, no, I'm the Baron. I gotta be here for court. They go, okay, and they all drove off. Why did they leave? Why weren't they there? It's because court wasn't worth it to them. Going out to eat was more important than court. Now, that doesn't mean that they were doing something wrong or they violated some sacred trust that we have in the SCA and in court. But what it does mean is that there was something about court that just wasn't worth it when they were going to go get food. So we want to change that. We want to make it that you want to come to court. You want to be there. It is worth your time. So with these principles in mind, we're going to talk about 3 different subjects. The first is the physical layout of court. How are we setting it up in the physical realm? The second, how do we manage the business of court? How do we arrange the information in court so that it continues to be engaging throughout? And last, how do we implement this change? How do we take what is being spoken about here in this class, what we may take and talk about more online or in person when we are able to? How are we able to do that? I should, by the way, mention that this class deals with the physical in-person courts and not about the ethereal courts. Those are a different animal and require a different way of looking at things. They serve their own purpose for their own time. For right now, we're talking about your general courts. I will be making a lot of general statements. Now, of course, for anything, there is an exception to the rule. So if you go, oh, but I remember this one time, that's totally fine. But please consider, was that one time compared to all the other times? So I'm going to be speaking in sort of generalities. All right? So let's start off with the physical layout of court. And the first thing I want us to talk about is the presence. In the Midrealm, for royal courts, this is the typical layout of court. Most of these images, some of you may notice from the Midrealm ceremonial handbook. I may have copied those images over here. They looked really nice and better than what I could find or draw up myself. So it is very typical that the sovereign and consort, that's the phrase that we use in the handbook, and that's what I'm going to try to keep throughout this. I may refer to king and queen only because in the Midrealm so far, that has always been the dynamic. The sovereign has always been the king, and the consort has always been a queen. But know that when I use king and queen or sovereign and consort, by sovereign I mean the person who won Crown Tournament, and by consort I mean the other person that was a part of that partnership going into Crown Tournament. All right? So the sovereign and consort between them is Oathbinder. And then off to the side, over here, is our herald. Occasionally, there will be what we often refer to as a queenside herald over here. But if there is only one herald, this is where the herald is. And this is very typical of the Midrealm royal court. This has 2 problems. The first is that while I don't think anyone ever intended it for it to be, this setup carries with it some sexist overtones. Once again, I do not believe that anyone in the SCA who thought of this layout and continue to do this layout have that in mind at all. But it does carry some negative messages. First and foremost, when there's only one herald, the person that has direct access to that herald is the sovereign, not the consort. In order for the consort and the primary herald to discuss things, the primary herald has to lean over and discuss that information with the consort, leaning over the king or using the king as a go-between. So the herald talks to the sovereign relays that information to the consort relays it back to the sovereign, back to the herald. Or the herald has to talk across the sovereign to speak to the consort. But the image is still that the sovereign is the one that has the voice of the herald. Now, as I mentioned, sometimes we have the queenside herald over here. That queenside herald, in every case that I've been able to think of, that queenside herald has always had fewer pieces of business, never did the opening or the closing of court, and the vast majority of time, the business they did have was either an arts and science award or an award that the queen specifically asked to give out. Everything else kind of defaulted to the king's side. Now, once again, I'm speaking in generalities. I'm not saying there weren't courts where it wasn't even 1-to-1. What I am saying is that in a lot of cases, this has been what I have witnessed. So, it carries that with it. The other problem that we have with this is a problem of communication. In order, like I said, for the herald to speak to the consort, you have to lean over. Or, if there are two heralds on either side, if there is a herald over here, let's say the queen side, the consort side herald calls in Lord Bob. Lord Bob is in the kitchen. Someone says, I will go get him. The next two pieces of business are kingside herald business. And so the kingside herald goes through business number 1. Lord Bob has now shown up. These two heralds have to effectively communicate with each other that Lord Bob is there and that queenside herald is now going to go out of order to get Lord Bob in. And maybe they can do that seamlessly. It is possible. But it still involves them trying to talk either in front of or behind the thrones in a way to communicate that. So what I would like to suggest is that we get rid of this model, that we stay away from having, when there's one herald, that herald be here, or when there are two heralds, having them on either side of the throne. Instead, I would suggest we go with something more akin to this. This, I will admit, was the model that Kasia and I used as Baron and Baroness. We ruled equally. We were equal partners. It didn't matter which one of us was in the militia or which one of us had a higher rank outside of being landed. We were equal. And so our herald was shared equally between us. This allows quick and easy communication. There's only one herald at a time. That herald can still switch out with other heralds. But there's only one herald that has to make a decision instead of trying to confer with another herald in the heat of the moment. All right? And sometimes it may just be a couple of seconds that those heralds have to talk, but it feels like an eternity when everyone's waiting for the heralds to decide something. This also puts Oathbinder to the side of the sovereign. I find that this is not an issue for a couple of reasons. One, in every case I've been able to think of, if both the sovereign and the consort are there, the person who grabs the sword is the sovereign. I don't think I've ever seen the consort take Oathbinder when both were there. Once again, there may be an example where that happened, but I think we can all agree in the vast majority of cases, the sovereign is the one that takes Oathbinder. If we put Oathbinder to the side, it does a couple of things. One, when the king has to grab Oathbinder right now, if it's in the middle, the king has to turn his back to get Oathbinder. Because the man holding Oathbinder, the king's champion, in most cases, is behind a little table right here. By putting Oathbinder off to the side, the person holding Oathbinder can instead step forward and lean Oathbinder towards the king, so that the king still faces the populace when he draws Oathbinder. Likewise, if the consort is drawing Oathbinder, the person holding Oathbinder need only step slightly in front of the king, kneel down in reverence, and hold Oathbinder up for the consort. It gives, I feel, a much more beautiful tableau than, once again, the king having to turn his back entirely to Oathbinder. So this is the first thing that I would suggest. We take the herald away from being to the side of the sovereign and away from the consort and put that herald in the middle. And Allegra, I agree. I believe most barons and baronesses that I have seen hold court also put the herald in the middle. And that may be because when it comes to being barons and baronesses, a set is equal. There is no, well, partner A is really the one who earned it, and partner B is kind of there. Not to say that exactly exists within sovereign and consort, but there is one who fights the tourney, and the other person they fight the tourney for. With Baron and Baroness, both submit together and are decided together. Everything is there in one package. So that might be partially it. It may just also be that tradition just never spread to the baronies. I don't know. I don't know of any baronies that do herald on the outside of one or the other. Excellent. And we'll talk about those suggestions, Dimitri, when we get a little bit later on, but I'm glad. So let's talk about next why some court setups fail. I will be using Valde as an example. This is not because Valde is the worst. It is not because Valde is the only event that this happens at. It just so happens I'm a Pentamere Herald. Valde is one of the largest events in Pentamere every single year. And I feel like it's gotten a reputation in the area of having courts that are hard to get through. So we're just going to use it as an example. Also, it helps. I could find photos on the Kalamazoo County website for the building. That didn't hurt either to use it for my example. All right. So if people would like, you can either come off of mute or you can put in the chat. What are some reasons that you think court setups fail? And it doesn't have to be, like I said, Valde specific. What are some things that you think we could work on? Give everyone some time for that while I sneak a drink. Dimitri, noisy audience. Yes, I'm going to refer to them as the noisy rabble later on, for sure. And acoustics. Oh, man, the acoustics in some places. I think a lot of people look at this site and they go, oh, a stage. There's a stage here. Well, obviously, a stage means good acoustics. Otherwise, why'd there be a stage? And I think we all know that that, unfortunately, is not the case. And you know what, Asa, that could easily be as well, that we kind of got away from thinking about it in that aspect. Absolutely. So let's look at how Valde Court is set up. All right, let's look at how Valde Court is set up currently. Currently, this is kind of the setup, except I left the herald in the middle just to reinforce that idea. But this is the current setup. All right. Taking the measurements off of the website that I got these plans from the herald to the back wall is probably over 100 feet. The audience typically exists in this front half of the room, maybe front 2/3. But the majority of the audience is up here. There is very little audience back here. Usually there's a lot of tables that get shoved back here. There might be some kids playing, but there's a lot of just empty space. So when the herald's voice reaches finally this back wall and bounces back, we don't get the full effect of that echo because it's so far away and there's all this empty space for us to interact with. Likewise, the stage that we use is called a proscenium arch stage, all right? What that means is that there are spaces here off to the side for the actors to be in, as well as space above where the curtains hang. Because of that, a lot of the herald's voice can actually get caught there. If I was to do a play on this stage, I would tell my actors that they are not allowed to be any farther back than 2 feet. Anything farther back than 2 feet, and that stage will eat up your sound. Yes, it looks like a stage, but as was pointed out here in chat, it's designed to be used with modern amplification. It was not designed to be acoustically well without that, all right? So if I was doing a play on here, I tell my actors within 2 feet. Now, we can't do that for court because we have to have room for people to kneel, and not only kneel, but get back up from kneeling and not fall off the edge of the stage. I think we can all agree that is very important, that people don't take a tumble, all right? But we look at this stage and we say, hey, this stage is raised up, it'll be easier to see them, and obviously it'll be easier to hear them, and that's just not the case. The last thing that we have that really hurts with this room is the things that happen right back here. I called them the noisy rabble earlier. All right? So we have to take care of those three problems here right off the bat. We have to take care of all of this space that's being taken up. We have to take care of the fact that the stage is eating our voice. And we have to take care of the noisy rabble. In order to do that, I have two proposed solutions. And once again, these solutions are not just Valde specific. You can apply them in other places. All right? So here's my solutions to this. We bring the herald and the rest of the presence down off the stage. Now, yes, it means they're going to be harder to see, but there are a lot of courts where we don't have them raised up, and they seem to work. Also, if we wanted to, nothing says that we can't try to bring that dais over from other areas or create a dais if we think that's really important. But we're going to bring the herald off, or the whole presence rather, off the stage and to about the 1/3 mark of the room. This means that the distance that the herald now has from here to here is more along 60 feet. And we've made it to where no one sits way back here, behind the presence. This area here is not going to have as much empty space for the sound to get lost in because it's full of people. So we move the presence off the stage, we move them up 1/3. We now increase the effectiveness of the echo back here. If you are ever heralding outside, do yourself a favor, do an oye just out into the open field once, and then turn and do an oye towards a shed that's 50 feet away. You will be amazed at the echo you get back and how much louder it is using that feature that's just there. So we can now use this wall better. We've also eliminated the stage eating our sound. So all that's happened just by bringing us down here. Oh man, better ventilation, Dimitri. Oh, you betcha. I wasn't even thinking about that, but yes. Oh, better ventilation. Now, but what about that noisy rabble, right? We're now even closer to them. How is this going to help? This is where we're going to need to possibly bring in some extra people. Most of the noisy rabble is past these main doors. So what you do is you set up a herald at that door that also has a list of what's going to be going on, and you give him 2 guards. Those guards keep the door shut. All right? So we're going to keep those doors shut. One moment here. So we're going to have that herald right here, and we're going to have a guard on the other side. Those guards will keep the door shut. What the herald can do is, as those peerage ceremonies are lining up that hallway, or as court business is happening that maybe some of those noisy rabble need to be a part of, the herald can open the door, lean in, and say, hey guys, your peerage ceremony? Yeah, that is 2 pieces of cord away, and close the door. People can still come out through the door if they're running late, all right? But we shut that door, and we say, hey, if you want to be noisy, that's fine. You're noisy on the other side of the door. Our only other option, really, I feel at this point, is to try to do contact embarrassment. And I don't think that's fair. I think instead, we just shut the doors and say, if you want to be noisy, that's fine. You're on the other side. The herald will tell you when you're needed. And then you can come into court and be quiet and be a good boy and girl. Especially, I don't think that having been the person that's gone into this back hallway to try to shush people, those people often have some similarities of clothing, very similar maybe neckwear and beltwear. Not all of them, but a good amount of them share those common features. And so just some guy going back and being like, hush, they'll hush for a while. they'll hush for like 30 seconds, but then one of them will start talking, and another one will start talking, and one of them will say something funny, and all of a sudden, while the king is saying, "And let us remember our dearly departed friend," up front in court, they'll hear a guy in the back going, "Ha! Ha! 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 Ha!" So we shut the doors. They've decided not to be a part of court, and that's fine. And I know that may sound harsh to some people, but they made the decision when they decided to stand back there and chat. We're shutting the doors. The herald and the guards back there will let them know when their presence is required. So this is one way that I would rearrange the court in that room. And with all of this, we're assuming we're still going to do court in this room. I don't think there's a better room at this particular site to do it, because they're all pretty big. So that's what the first way. The second way, very similar. I would just rotate court 90 degrees. Now I only have about 50 feet to this wall, and it allows court to spread out to the side. Now we do run the risk, though, of the people here on the extreme sides not hearing everything. The one benefit to this one is that because the herald is closer to this back wall, it creates a sort of sound shell for the herald. Not a perfect sound shell by any means, but it does give him something else behind him that will help. If you've ever listened to the courts that we've done the past 2 years at Penzic, where we've done them outdoors, we've been using the fort as basically a sound shell, and it's worked amazingly well. It helps get that sound right down there into the lower parts of the field where everyone else is sitting. So this would be my other suggestion, is that we turn things 90 degrees and we use that back wall as a sound shell. So I'm going to go back here a little bit. When we're doing court layout, let's consider the following. What strong voices do we have? What's going to hurt our sound carrying? What can help bolster our sound? And how do we crowd control? I don't think we really pay attention to these things. Instead, in the case of Validate, and I think a lot of courts, we go, what looks pretty? And don't get me wrong, there is something to be said for things looking pretty. All right? We don't want court to be held in, with a bunch of mundanity in the background, or with something that, just is not appealing to the eyes in the background. However, if we can't hear what's going on, watching what's going on may not be enough. So we should, I feel like, consider these things as well when we are doing court layout. So that's the first thing that I wanted to talk about, was how are we laying out the physical space of court, both in the royal presence and actually where we're putting that presence in relationship to everyone else who's a part of court, and maybe adding in a couple other people that can help with crowd control there in the back. Before I go on, are there any questions, any thoughts, any comments about this section of the presentation? Bodies can't eat sound. Absolutely they can. I think though those same bodies were going to be eating sound anyways. Now, mind you, yes, we are now at their level instead of up on stage level. So I am by no means saying that, but for Valde's point, the people in the back could not hear already. So I feel like at least doing this, we hopefully can get some echo off that back wall. That will help. And like I said, I don't know if these solutions are perfect, but I can tell you in my 10 years of going to Valde, they haven't been tried. I definitely think so that's one thing that I discussed with some people, was definitely a relay herald. That herald that, I don't know if you want for all courts, but definitely a herald that can do, like, you don't want the relay herald to read the entire scroll, right? But the relay herald may say, the king and queen have called forth blah, blah, blah. Their job is to have good hearing, to know where the herald is, to have a copy of the program and be able to go, okay, we're on this, and relaying that back for sure. Yes, absolutely. We need crown buy-in, and we're going to get into that. We are going to get into crown buy-in towards the end of this presentation. And that's why part of how I wrote this is going to be for royals and nobles, for territorial barons and baronesses. I hope they watch this and think about this. So in short, no. I think anything that we have to transport and set up at every event is not, because now that is one more thing for one more person to haul around to every event. Now, that does not mean, for instance, I know Valde rents a dais from the fairgrounds, and they have that. I know that that happens. And yes, Allegra, absolutely, in the end, the Royals set up court. But hold on to that thought. I'll talk about that in the latter third. So so there are things I think that local groups can do ahead of time. And once again, we're going to talk about that in the latter third as far as local group involvement. No, I will not. One, I'm not an expert in electronic amplification, and I will just come right out and say it. I don't like the idea of it. I've looked into it enough because for a while I thought maybe we need to do that for certain events, and so I looked into it, and being able to properly mic someone to where it sounds good takes expertise. Like, you just can't throw a lapel mic on a guy and say go. And once again, that is now more equipment that has to go, and it takes our events even farther away from the medieval field. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of it. And so I'll admit that. I'm gonna let people know my bias on that one. And also partially because I feel like we haven't tried other things first. If we tried everything under the sun and nothing works, then maybe we need to go to that. But I would love for us to try some other things before we got into electronic amplification and see if those things work first, because they involve no investment in money, no investment in, like I said, having to have someone transport that, always be there to set it up, to maintain it, because some people will be a little bit rougher on the electronics than we would like. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and move forward here to managing the business of court. So managing the business of court. So in this section, we're going to talk about three things that we can do. One, mix up the court agenda. The second is limit the business of court. And the third is including entertainment at key points. Now, I mentioned earlier that court should always be entertaining. What I'm talking about here as including entertainment at key points is including things that help break up different sections, that provide something different. For those of you who have studied theater, almost a Brechtian thing that makes people take notice of what's happening now on the stage. All right. So first one, mixing up the court agenda. Currently, and once again, this is not an always statement, but kind of the standard for royal courts is all the AOAs get announced, then all the grant of arms get announced, and then the peerages happen. Sometimes if there's like 3 peerages, we might do a peerage in the middle and then 2 at the end. But if you look at the vast majority of courts, they follow this: AOAs, GOAs, peerages, sprinkle in a couple of non-award things in the middle. I would suggest we mix this up, and we don't do them in that order for a couple of reasons. One, new attendees, we're calling them up first to get their AOA level awards. Chances are, if you're getting an AOA level award, you are newer to the organization. By and large, we all know that guy that's been in the SE for 15 years and never got his AOA because everyone just assumed. But by and large, the new attendees are the ones getting those AOAs, the newer people. Well, now we're asking those people that have seen court the fewest times to go up and interact with court without having a quick refresher. So if we put a couple of grants first, now they get a chance to see what that looks like. Okay, you go up and you bow, and you're far away, then you go up and you bow when you're closer, and you kneel, and there's no award speech at the end. I don't have to talk. I just nod and maybe cry a little bit. They put the thing on, and I get up, and I back, and I bow, I back and I bow, and I turn around and I sit down. Cool. They get to see that a couple of times. Helps them out. Secondly, it breaks up the monotony. There have been so many times in court where I'm like, all right, let's see, we just started the GOAs. So let's see. AOAs usually take about half the time GOAs now and here, so and we got how many peerages, and I can calculate how long court's going to be and decide if I'm going to be bored right then and there. If we break it up, it keeps things interesting. It keeps people sort of guessing on where they are. When's the next big thing? So it allows that to happen. It also means that people who are coming from far away in a kingdom, it mixes up when they know people. Chances are, if I'm going to an event down in Kentucky, I probably won't know many of the people getting AOA level awards. Probably. I might know a herald that's getting an AOA level award, but I'm probably not going to know that AOA fighter or that AOA service person. Not because their service is important, but just because by the nature of distance and what those awards usually stand for, I'm probably not going to know them. But I might know the GOA level people. And I almost hopefully know all the peerage people. So for mixing that up, it goes from person I don't know and can now go, oh, cool, that guy just got his AOA in heraldry. I'll make sure to introduce myself to him later, to, oh man, his lordship Dave that I know really well just got his grant level award. Awesome. We can mix that up. All right, keeps things interesting, keeps people's attention. And because we're keeping people's attention, let's go back to that noisy rabble. That noisy rabble knows that it probably only has to come up in the beginning to swear fealty if it's required, or at the end when they are either announcing or making a new peer. So if the noisy rabble doesn't know when that's going to happen, they have to be quiet and listen the entire court. Instead of going, all right, I said my oath, I can now go back, I can talk until we get towards the end. When I see Sir So-and-so go up to start begging the boon, that's when I know I have to stop talking. Now we've mixed it up, and so when all of a sudden the peer going up to beg the boon goes up third in the business order, they'll start to take notice that they have to pay attention the entire court. That may not work on all of them. I'm not saying that will clear out the noisy rabble completely, but it will mean that at least some of them will have to be paying attention in court or decide it ain't worth it and they'll go farther away. So that's the main reason I would mix up the court agenda. We're going to help out the new attendees by giving them other people to watch throughout. We're going to break up the monotony of just AOA, GOA, peer. And we're going to make it to where people just have to pay attention more to court. Give them a reason to pay attention. Next, limiting the business of court. I'm going to say this as a former landed. Territorials and royal court, you should get one piece of business. One. Count them. It's one. Once again, people are coming to your courts, to your event from far away. And those people that are getting your baronial awards are important people. And the awards they are getting are important awards. Absolutely. But chances are I, a person not from your barony, do not know that person getting the baronial award and or don't know what that baronial award is about. Territorials are empowered to have their own separate courts. And these courts don't even have to be at an event. These courts can be at your business meeting, at a cookout, at a revel. Technically, I could have sat in my bathroom and held baronial court. There was nothing that said I couldn't. I never did, for the record, but I could have. Barons and baronesses have the ability to hold court anywhere in their lands at any time. So why wait until you have a bunch of people that are there that don't know your populace well to give out these awards and make it less personal? Instead, give out awards at your fighter practice. Give out awards at your revels. Give out awards, at your business meetings. Or there was a case where Kasha and I had to name a new rapier champion, and they weren't able to come to the event that we were hoping to name them at. So at an event, which had a royal court, before the battle, without interrupting the rest of the day's flow, we took the oath of our baronial champion right there on the field and then sent them out to fight. It was its own separate thing. Didn't interrupt court. But I bet we can all think of baronial courts that have gone on a bit too long during a royal court. So territorials, limit it to one. If you have to give out an award, sure, fine. Give it to one person, make them feel super special that they were the one you singled out. But give the royals the rest of the time. But sure, Allegra, absolutely. If the queen says, hey, I want you to give out every baronial award under the sun at the event, go with it. Absolutely. All right. I think I've hammered on that enough for that point. But just be aware, territorials won. Awards, prizes, etc. I was on a Zoom call the other day with some heralds, and we're talking about a possible heraldic ceremony thing in the future. And we're like, when are we going to do it? Should we do it during court? And I said, no, we shouldn't do this special heraldic ceremony in court because court already has so much stuff going on. Let's put this in its own separate realm and make it special on its own without requiring everyone else to be there. I'll give you an example of how we already do this. In the vast majority of cases, dependents. In this kingdom, for the majority of that I've ever seen, when a peer takes a dependent, it's its own private off to the side ceremony. It's not during court. And those ceremonies have been beautiful and moving. I have seen some wonderful ceremonies in which a peer takes a dependent that are just so neat, that a lot of thought went into it. And the people that were there were the people that opted in. They were the household members of the peer's house. They were the loved ones on both sides of that. They were people of the barony that wanted to witness it. And it was special and happened in its own time, in its own place. We can do that with other things. Getting a degree from RUM, and I say this right now in a RUM Zoom, I'm hoping the RUM's chancellor does not shut me off for saying this, we can give out those degrees at other times. Not because they are not important. They are. People worked hard for those things. But it's another item we're lengthening court, and there's, quite frankly, a lot of people who don't really opt into hearing all those names read and coming in to get diplomas. Instead, you can have a special graduation ceremony. Have it as part of pre-court entertainment. Have it as part of feast. Have it as part of the dance. Have it happen spontaneously during the day. And that is just one example. I am by no means saying that that's the only thing. We have ANS prizes that are given out. I'll even take Cinnabar's Grand Day of Tournaments as an example. We give out all our awards during court, and I love doing it. But you know what? We could maybe have instead shortened court down by having all those prizes next to each tournament table, and as you won the tournament, we announce your name and give you the prize right then and there so you can hold it up on the field that you were just victorious in. You could still make that special. Exactly, Dimitri. And I've seen crowns come to so many of those dependency ceremonies when they have the time. Obviously, they have a busy schedule. So yeah, we can take all those things and give them their own special place. Moving on, the ceremonies. Let's trim down those ceremonies. Mostly what I'm talking about here is peerage ceremonies. Peerage ceremonies are super important. I love as a herald when I get to herald someone's peerage ceremony. That means something so special to me when they ask me to be a part of it. I love doing it. But we also have to make sure that that peerage ceremony is not ballooning out. And here's how we can do that. Here are some things. The oaken spurs are so neat. I love those oaken spurs. I love every time they read the lineage. I want that to be in the ceremony. I do. And I hope it stays. But imagine if someone with those who's an oaken knight also gets 5 letters from out of kingdom to say how cool they are. And those also get read in court. And then the lineage gets read in the court. And then there's the chain that he's given. But then there's another chain that was made for him by the special person. And all of that happens during the peerage ceremony. And that peerage ceremony balloons outwards. The same thing that we did with awards and prizes, we can do here with the peerage ceremony. Those things are still important. Those letters they receive from other people, super important. but we can find other ways of using them besides having 5 letters read into court. What if instead all those letters got framed in little picture frames, and they were put out during the vigil for people to read about this person? And every now and again in the vigil, when the vigilant needs a break, one of those letters is brought in that frame for them to read and to contemplate and think about. And then it's taken back out and set on that table. Those letters are still important, and they still have a spot in that sacred moment for that person. But it ain't 5 letters being read in court. Likewise with a chain. If you have this is the baronial medallion for this peerage order that you get. This is the household medallion that you get. Here's your personal medallion you met, and here's one that was made by your protege or apprentice brother or sister. Give out one of those during court, whichever one you think is most important. And once again, the rest of them have presented during that vigil ceremony. Hey, brother, sister, I'm so happy that you've received this accolade. I'm so proud to have, been a dependent alongside of you, and I made this for you. Give it to them then. It'll still be special. They can't wear it yet. They can still hold it. It won't burn their skin. Give it to them then and let them know in that special private moment how special that is. Once again, we are not taking away the specialness of things. We are not saying, hey, your things that you love, that you care about, I don't want them. We're giving them their own space and their own time outside of court. And it should be noted as well that the Book of Ceremonies is a guideline. Technically, for every order except knighthood, the sovereign's going to say, you're a this and you're a that. No oath, no nothing. You don't even have to give an oath for the other orders when you get it. Not required. So take that ceremony and make it yours, but make it yours within a reasonable length of time. And you can make it special and make it just 10 minutes. All right. Can the item be moved to some other time? We've talked a lot about some of these other things, and that kind of goes into that subject as well. Is there a better place or time for this item to happen? Can I do a battlefield knighting? Can I do a battlefield laurelling? I have seen a laurelling done battlefield style during a ball. To be exact, they snuck in the person's peer in a mask. They did a mask ball. The person's peer did not come to the rest of the event, but they showed up to the ball in a mask and clothes that they had never worn before, or someone else's clothes. And went forward. So Allegra says, doesn't regalia need to be from the hand of the monarch? I don't know. I mean, I bought my wife laurel earrings. I didn't give them to the king and say, hey, can you hand these over to my wife? Now, they can't wear them until then. That first one that gets placed on them, yes. That they actually wear, sure. But I don't think, and mind you, this may be a part of peerage culture in the Midrealm I do not yet know about. But I don't think that it necessarily has to come, from them at that moment. Just the first one you wear should, when they signify it, absolutely. But I don't think there's a problem with, hey, I made you this chain. I hope later on you can wear it. So yeah, and like I said, maybe there's a part of peerage culture that I don't know about. All right. Or last but certainly not least, does this event even need a court? And I know to some people that might be blasphemous. Like, what do you mean an event without a court? That a court, that's what makes it an event. It doesn't have to be. If your event's all about having a big dance ball, maybe you don't need a court. Or maybe what you do is you open court and the ball is your court. And every now and again between dances, you have a herald read out an award, and then you continue on with the ball. You combine those two things. All right, and court becomes a little bit more informal. So just think about it. Does this event need a court? And I would say that's more for the baronial courts than the royal courts. Unless your royalty lives real nearby and they've already been to a lot of events in your area, chances are this may be one of the few times they're in the area and one of the few times they can give out awards. But for baronial events where there's no royals showing up, maybe it's not needed. Or maybe it can be folded into something else. Court during feast. You know, we're going to have feast be earlier, so you're not eating at 8:30 o'clock at night. We're going to start feast at 6, and we're just going to give out some awards during feast. So think about that as well. Any other thoughts? Sorry, before I go on to court entertainment, any other thoughts about limiting the business of court? Limiting the business of court. Yeah, and obviously all of these are every so often. I should say all these. A lot of these are every so often, right? You know, if I've gone to my 5th feast court in a row, I might be like, all right, we can cut that out. But one every couple months to be like, oh yeah, this was a feast court. I think that'd be kind of cool. So yeah, I think you can do some cool stuff with it. All right, court entertainment. So court entertainment is anything that we are doing to break up that monotony of court. All right. My rule of thumb is that for every 20 to 30 minutes, you put in some sort of court entertainment, something that shakes things up. Now, if your court's only going to be 40 minutes long, it might not be worth it at that point to add in 5-10 minutes of entertainment that now pushes it closer to an hour. But I have been to some courts that were 30 minutes and felt like an eternity, and I have been to courts that were 2 hours and flew by. And a lot of it had to deal with the entertainment there in court. What was there that made it fun? Entertainment, once again, does not have to be a court jester. It does not need to be performers necessarily. And any performers you do get, they need to be your A+ performers. Storytellers, bards, musicians, they should all have their chance to perform at some point. But during court, you have an audience that is a captured audience, all right? They didn't necessarily choose to hear the song. They're there when the song happened. So you need to have your best bards, your best instrumentalists, your best storytellers for court. And they need to keep it short. And the more they can involve the audience, the better. So a story where every time the bear shows up, the crowd goes, "Rawr!" That keeps them entertained. It gives them something. All right? But entertainment can come in other ways. Crown giving out gifts. And here, the crown doesn't actually have to provide the gifts. Guarantee you, as Baron, if the crown would have contacted me and said, hey, we would like to give out cookies to everyone in court. Please have a gross of cookies. Chocolate chip, ginger snaps, whatever. A gross of cookies ready to go so we can hand them out during court. I would have gotten my bakers on it. Hey guys, the crown wants cookies. He asked for a gross. I bet we can do a gross of, oh, maybe not a gross of a gross, but I bet we can do 3 or 4 grosses. Let's get those cookies made. And then the crown during court can be like, you know what? Let's stop. Cookie break. And they can have people come out with cookies. Is it an outdoor court? Is it maybe in June or July? Have pictures of tea and lemonade. And at some point during court, the crown or the herald announces that if you would like a drink, to hold up your cup. And different squires and apprentices and proteges will come around with those pitchers, and they'll fill up your cup with either tea or lemonade. It's small, entertaining things. It's not major, right? We don't have to put on a song and dance number, but we're doing something that helps break up court a little bit and keeps you involved. Now I can sing along with the song. Now I can raise my cup and get something to drink. Now I get to take one of those cookies and eat it. So any of those things can really help with court to a point. The one thing you do have to consider is after court activities. So if your court entertainment goes too long and you're pushing back the ball that's supposed to happen right after court, you're doing those people dancing that ball a disservice. So we definitely want to be careful the entertainment we choose balances the length of what we want to have with court, But if we have the right entertainment with the right entertainer, that can happen very easily. Yeah, oh, Allegra, right? Popcorn at Court as a fundraiser. There was, I think it was Penzic 2 years ago, the first time we did it out on the battlefield. They set up sort of like a beer tent thing in the back that people could go get booze at, and it was perfect. One, it told people, hey, you can talk, you just got to talk there in the back near the booze tent. But two, it kept people entertained. People could go back and they could get a drink. It was amazing, those little things that you can do. All right, those little things you can do. And a lot of that can be done by the local group having that ready. Because being the Crown is hard. And I'm not expecting the Crown to every single week have a brand new thing no one's seen before to entertain court. But your local barony can think about that. And that runs us into, how do we implement this? This is my last slide, folks. We have made it to the end. How do we implement all this? 1, senior heralds as subject matter experts. In order to become king and queen, in order to become a baron or baroness of a territory, even, the decision is not whether or not you know how to set up court. Give you a great example. Before Kasia and I's first event as Baron and Baroness, so we got invested at Grand Day of Tournaments. We were then going to hold court at 12th night. Or not 12th night, Wassail. Wassail is a baronial event. It would be our first actual big court. I was a herald. I knew how courts were supposed to be set up. I was ready. Kasia, my wife, had never been behind the scenes of court. And she asked, hey, can I take care of the court docket? And I'm like, sure, no problem. So the next day she comes in, and she must have had 50 pieces of paper in her hands. And she's like, here you go. I printed out the court docket. And I stared at it in horror. And I'm like, what is this? And she goes, well, it's the script. It's everything we're going to say in the order we're going to say it. And I'm like, well, that's not how we do court. Like, she had made a play, basically. And I had to go, no. Here's how you do it. And we shortened that down to 1 page plus the scroll text. Now, it wasn't because my wife was wrong. It's because she wasn't a subject matter expert in the field. She didn't know how courts were supposed to be, what have been ran. She didn't have that way of thinking about it. Just like I don't have the way of thinking about writing a song that she does. I'm a subject matter expert. And so when I'm talking to the Crown, I always must be respectful of their rank and their position. And in the end, what they say goes. But I need to also make sure that I'm giving wise counsel to the Crown. And giving wise counsel to the Crown means being the subject matter expert as a herald. Is saying, hey, your majesties, I know up on the stage looks really nice. I'm afraid people in the back can't hear you. If we moved you here, I think they could hear you. Hey, your majesties, I was reading through the peerage ceremony for tonight, and I just noticed that there are 4 different knights talking during this peerage ceremony. And this is one of 3 peerage ceremonies. Do you think we could maybe ask them to choose one? Choose the one they want to hear from the most. Exactly, Allegra. Look, I've gone to dozens of museums. I cannot paint to save my life. All right. I've been to several operas. Does not mean I am ready to star in the Magic Flute. And I think it's the same thing here. You can have been to several courts, but behind the scenes get a little nasty. Oh, that's really cool. I like that. The little stewed fruit. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Other people should totally get in on the game there. I wonder if it was someone I knew. I started out in Palantir. Anyways, so senior herald, be that subject matter expert. Speak up with respect to who you're speaking to, but speak up. Let them know. It's probably something they've never thought of before. Oh, I never thought of the fact that the stage eats up all the sound. Or, oh man, yeah, you know what? I just saw they had a script for the peerage ceremony, and so I didn't look at there was 4 people that were going to speak then. You know, give that to them. If they choose not to follow that advice, if they have a different plan, a different vision, if they think something else is more important, that is fine. We've at least done our part. Second thing, royals setting the example early. I loved it as Baron when the royals would get all the barons and baronesses together, and they would say, hey, for the duration of our reign, we would like to see the following from you guys. Sometimes it was, we're going to have a sign-up sheet outside of the royalty room. When you come to the event, if you're a baron or baroness, please sign that so we know you'll be in the procession. Sometimes it was, hey, at Penzic, you're going to be providing 2 benches for Midrealm Royal. So you got, the next 8 months, build 2 benches, Midrealm Royal, have them there. I never minded these things because I was always told in advance, and now I knew what to expect. Same thing with heralds. And this is where heralds can also help, either as Pale Herald, possibly taking this on if they wanted to, not to put too much pressure on Pale, but also if you're just a local herald and one of your buddies becomes prince, talk to them about this ahead of time and say, hey, so when you eventually are holding court, do you want your herald in the middle or off to the side? Do you want the awards to be read as the person is walking up? Or do you want to wait till they're kneeling? Do you want all this? And then we can spread that information to the rest of the heralds. We can have a document that says, hey, for the duration of these guys' reign, court will be this way. And we can go ahead and then think about how court setup needs to be based off of that. Likewise, if the royals go, yeah, period ceremonies, we're going to pare those down. We've had a lot of lengthy ones lately. They can set that expectation early with any vigilant they create. Hey, I know you'll be working on your period ceremony. Please make sure that it kind of follows these guidelines. We'd like them to follow these guidelines. They don't have to say this is exactly your period ceremony, but they can say, please have no more than 3 people speak for you. Please make sure that those that speak to you, their thing is less than 45 seconds. We ask that you only be presented with X amount of regalia during the ceremony itself. Set those limits. That's fine to do. The royals have that prerogative. And honestly, by setting those limits, it helps people think about what is most important. If I know that I had to only give this class in 5 minutes instead of, an hour plus, I would have picked the most important thing, and that would have been my one thing, and that would have been fine. If when I became baron, they said, hey, your ceremony is too lengthy, you can only have one of these 4 things, that's fine. I picked the thing that's most important. I find other places for everything else. And I was a pretty verbose baron, I feel. Next, event stewards and territorials. This kind of goes into what we were talking about before with the site. Chances are the royals did not take a look at the site before they had court there, especially an event they've never been at. They've had other things to do all day. They haven't thought about the throne setup. Event stewards and territorials, they'll have. They can look and go, what resources do we have? Is this going to be a good place for court or not? How can we sort of set things up ahead of time to make court happen this way to where people can hear it? And I bet you most of the time the crown won't even notice that decisions were made on their behalf when it comes to the thrones are going to be set up here and the voices are going to go that way. They've been busy all day doing other very important things. Event stewards and territorials know that site well enough to be able to do that. And they know their populace well enough to go, hey, what can we do to help out? What if we had cake in the back for everyone and make sure that the royals knew it? We've got an amazing cake baker. What if, last time we did that popcorn fundraiser, raised a bunch of money, people loved it, we're going to do it again. They can help out. The last thing to do here is to be self-critical. Self being very important in that. All right? I'm not asking for us to go and tear each other down. What I'm asking is, when we get done with the court, whether we are the nobles, whether we are the heralds, whether we're the guards, whether we're sick, no matter who we are, what role we play, we need to be critical enough to ask the question, what worked, what didn't, what's going to be better next time? Ask people those questions. Hey, could you hear me in the back? Yes or no? Hey, we waited till they knelt to read all the award text. Did that take up too much time? Yes or no? Hey, was the song we had in the middle of court worth it? Or should we cut that in the future? Ask those questions. Be self-critical. Listen to what people tell you about these things. People, as of a Facebook post I made about a month and a half ago that spurred this class from happening, people have opinions about court. So just be critical of yourself when it comes to that and ask those questions. And yes, after action reports, those of you that do anything involving combat, same basic principle. Look at what worked, what didn't. How do we reshape it next time? What do we do? There's definitely no one magic bullet. There's no one solution to any and all of this. But there are things we can try to do and then see if it works. So that is basically my thoughts on how we can rethink court here in the Midrealm. I can stay on for a while longer, so if you have thoughts or questions, feel free to ask them. We've got one. What are you talking about is court in the world that was and hopefully will be again in the near future? What would you say about continuing online courts, especially at the baronial level, to take care of things outside of the in-person version? I think while we are in this world of needing to stay home, of needing to social distance, of needing not to have large gatherings, those online courts hold a very special and important role. And once again, this is my opinion, I'm glad they exist. I'm glad people have gone to them. I am glad people enjoy them. I know myself and some others don't. And that's fine. It has nothing to do with how they were set up. They're just not my thing. And that's totally fine. That's probably a lot of me being an extrovert, being like, but if I can't, you know, be there with the people, it's not what I want. That's what I find important in court, and it misses that. And that is nobody's fault. And every single person who has worked on those courts have done an amazing job and deserve kudos. But I think the SCA is a social organization, and that socializing happens better when we are able to safely be in the same realm. But your mileage may vary. I think if people do want to do more of those for local things, or if they find that those are useful for their populace, then go for it. If that's what works for you, great. I think as we continue to have them, we'll need to evaluate on how they work, what's working well with them, what can we do better. But I definitely think they got off to a strong start here. I think all of the efforts that that Seto and Inez and now the new king and queen that put towards it, as far as having stuff behind them and having the silent herald and having all the scrolls scanned in, that's all amazing stuff for sure. Oh, and absolutely, the new normal has normalized Zoom. In my role, in my mundane job, I teach. I'm a trainer. Before this, I always trained physically in a classroom. Now I teach in Zoom, and that may be something that happens a lot more in my life. Like, we never considered going to Zoom. We were like hesitant to ever use Zoom for any sort of training. So much so my company would fly trainers to Arizona to stay for 2 weeks in a hotel and then fly them back to Detroit. That's how much we resisted Zoom. We would rather pay for that airfare and that hotel fare. And now we sort of had to embrace Zoom. So definitely it's something different. So let's see. What do you think about having court in the morning before activities get started? Then we don't run into the crunch of getting things wrapped up before the hall can get set up. I think some courts could definitely work that way. I think we'd have to have a shift in the culture of when people expect to arrive at events. I mentioned earlier on that I like to show up on time. And if doors open at an event at 9, if I'm any later than 9:15, I feel like I'm late. Other people are kind of like, doors open at 9, I don't have to get there till 1. So I think we have to have a slight change in culture in order to have everything set up in time there in the morning. But I think there are some things we could switch into the morning to sort of almost act as an opening ceremonies. I know, once again, Crown Tournament kind of does that. They have a morning court to sort of open up the ceremonies of Crown. Grand Day of Tournaments has an opening court to sort of show off the prizes. So I do think that's something we can definitely do. Yeah, Allegra just mentioned that as well. And yeah, no, I agree with His Excellency Northwoods. Being able to see people's faces is really cool. And like I said, I'm glad that we are doing them. I'm glad that people are loving them. I'm glad that we were able to embrace that and keep on. I think it's been important for our culture, not just as the Midrealm with the SCA, to still keep that contact, even if it can't be physically. Yep, and then there's also travel. Might be useful for some of those things you should move outside of court. Yes, and we can definitely move some of those things online into a digital space and do that. Up to and including funny skits. I don't know if you saw, but on the Midrealm Facebook page, Midair and Gregoire and Jason and a couple others did like a little funny skit about, not being able to go to Penzic and recreating the Penzic experience. And it was funny, and it was filmed and put on YouTube, So those things that sometimes we would put in court as skits can also be done online, including recognition. We can't be in person baronial courts. And I think that'll honestly be even more important when we first get out of quarantine, because there'll be so much business probably to still go through. And I think people will be wanting to have that social time once again when we can safely do it. Always with that caveat. Just as much as we also have the caveat of court is always at the whim of their majesties on how it goes, we also have, we really want to do this stuff when we can safely do this stuff. So yeah. All right. Are there any other questions for me while we are here? And obviously, if you think something later, if those of you that watch this later on Facebook want to talk, feel free to reach out to me to discuss the topic, to brainstorm some ideas. It may be a while till we are back again in a physical realm. When I first thought up this class, I thought we would be back to events by now, and well, that was wrong. But still, I think when we get back into those physical realms, this will be something great for us to look at. So thank you all for attending. I appreciate it, and I hope to be able to discuss this more with you guys in the future.